Okay, well, thank you for joining us. This is going to be a really special conversation. We are really glad to be joined today by Atalya Ben-Abba, but with the who I connected to through the Refuser Support Network, which I part of the reason why I wanted to bring this conversation to our Central Ohio community was because I'd heard a lot of people asking, so where are the Israeli soldiers resisting? And I think Atalya is going to be able to bring a lot of answers to that question. Hopefully, it'll also give us the chance to be inspired as we think about what is the work that we want to do as a chapter going forward and what do we want to learn about. We are part of why it was important to record today also is we are scheduled on Eid. We're really lucky to have lots of Palestinian Muslim members associated with, so we're looking forward to sharing this with them as well afterwards. And I hope that what we're going to do now is we're going to hear Atalya for like 15 minutes. I'm going to ask a few questions. We're all going to open the floor for everyone else to ask questions. And then we're going to close with some ways that you can take action and learn more with JVP Central Ohio and our partners in the area. Any questions or comments about that format before we get started? Okay, well, thank you so much, Atalya, for joining us, and we're looking forward to hearing what you've got to share.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to talking with you. So I will start by introducing myself and telling you a little bit about myself, and then I'll talk about different initiatives that the organizations that I am a part of are working on regarding refusal, regarding resistance to the occupation, to the genocide. So my name is Atalya. I was a conscientious objector in 2017 when I was 19. I refused to I refused to enlist to the Israeli military because I refused to become a part of the occupying forces of the oppression of Palestinian people. I viewed any role in the military as taking part in this oppression. And I chose specifically to refuse publicly, which is not the only option. But I chose this option of sort of releasing like an official statement of my refusal and why I'm going to refuse, and to have like a demonstration around my enlistment day, and because I thought it was a lot of importance in making that statement of refusal a public statement, and something that is very clear, like the motives behind it are very clear.
Carol Stevens is going to be 88.
Elise, can I ask you to please mute yourself?
88. Yep.
Okay.
8 and 11.
One moment.
Great.
I got it. You're muted. Thank you.
So like the consequences of my public refusal were imprisonment in military prison. I spent 4 months in military prison. And the way it sort of logistically looks like when you refuse is that you just come to the military base on your enlistment date, and you just tell like the commanding officer in the area, like the first person you sort of see, you tell them I refuse to enlist, and then they take you to like a committee, or like to meet with like a person who will be like, oh no, you don't know what you're doing, you should enlist, and then you have to refuse again. And after you're like very insistent that you're refusing to enlist, they'll take you into arrest or like detention. And after, for me, it was usually after like 3 days in detention, you'll actually meet with a judge. but it's like super internal to the military system. Like it's not truly a judge. It's just like a high-ranking officer and with no like, legal training of any sort. And this high-ranking officer will sentence you. And because you haven't officially become a soldier, even though the system already views you as a soldier, they can't give you more than a month in prison. If they will want to do that, they need even a higher ranking officer. So each time I would get a month in military prison, then I would be released and I'll have to enlist again. Like you don't get exemption. You were just like punished, but you still need to enlist. So then you come to the military base and you need to go through this process again. So I went through this process 4 times and I applied for a conscience committee like during this process, which I knew I won't be, I knew this committee won't accept me as a conscientious objector. I mean, it's a committee that's internal to the military and they specifically target political objectors. So the moment you are like very clear with your politics and for your reason for refusal, the chances of you actually being exempt through this committee are very low. But it was more, like the idea of like having this, like this sort of sham committee and like having this engagement with it. But following that, I got an exemption for like bad and horrible behavior through like a different sort of system that they have. And specifically, I got an exemption for bad behavior because I spent more than 90 days in military prison. And this type of refusal is like the public refusal. And currently there is a refuser. Her name is Ella Keidal Greenberg. She refused like less than a week ago and was sentenced for 30 days. And she is supported by a group called Mesorvot, which is a group that the organization that I'm a part of, Refuser Solidarity Network, also supports. But besides this type of refuser, there is also people who just find ways to get an exemption. And you can do it, the most easy way is through getting a medical exemption. And that would usually be on accounts of mental health. I mean, you can pay enough to a psychiatrist that he'll give you a note and then you can get an exemption this way. And you can fake, for women, you can fake being like Orthodox religious. So more people get exemptions this way. Like really a lot more. Some people also go through the conscience committee, just sort of downplaying their politics and more like trying to come off as pacifists, which is what works. So the refusal movement in Israel is usually comprised of a few people who publicly refused and went to prison, and many people who did what we call gray refusing, which is getting exemptions in other ways. But when we turn to reserve soldiers, we also see other ways of people just not showing up. And usually for reserve soldiers, if they just don't show up, they won't have very harsh consequences. It's very rare. Only recently, we see the Israeli military being more harsh for reserve soldiers because they rely so much on the reserve soldiers in order to commit the crimes they are committing in Gaza. And now Refuser Solidarity Network is investing a lot of its energy in supporting these reserve refusers and also in sort of organizing them in a way that to allow them to speak publicly, because we know when refusers speak publicly, it will encourage more people to refuse. And so there is a refuser letter of reservers with more than 200 signatories, with people speaking publicly in the news about the refusal. And we see, especially now, following these like recent attacks on Gaza, higher percentages of people were refusing, but also publicly speaking about it. And I will add that one of the reasons less people speak about it publicly is that you do get sanctioned, mainly like socially, like by your peers, by your family. And I think the older people are, it's harder. I think for younger people, it's easier, you know, your friend group is already changing. But for reserve soldiers, it's really difficult. Also, they have a stronger relationship with their like unit in the military. And a lot of them will be like, oh, I can't leave my friends behind. If all of us refuse, maybe we'll do it, but I just can't be the one sort of doing it by myself. And that's why it is so important to show that it's a movement, and that it's not something that you're doing by yourself. And so we're investing a lot of our energy into sort of expanding the reserve soldier refusal as a movement, and trying to sort of amplify their voices.
Great. I have, are you ready for questions?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm gonna ask a couple and then we'll open it up. So get them ready if you're thinking. Well, the first question I'm wondering about is when did you actually decide to publicly refuse, and how did you come to that decision?
So I made a decision in 2016, when I was 18. I was doing like this year of civil service, and I was living like this. It's like this youth movement thing. I did it with the Shomar Tza'ir, which is sort of a Zionist socialist movement. And we lived together for a year in a commune, and we had all these seminars, mainly about trying to convince us to enlist and to enlist together into like specific units, which are like, and they had all these like ideas of like changing the system from within, and it's like heavy on the propaganda. And for me, it was really influential because the ideas that they're brought were like giving me sort of the platform to engage with like a lot of the questions I had of like, could I change the system from within? The answer is no. What is my social responsibility? They would talk a lot about like social morality and sort of having a moral social voice and like trying to affect society in positive ways. And that sort of made me want to publicly refuse and do something that sort of has this like social influence. And so I made a decision and I finished this year. And then after a few months, I refused.
So there's thank you. There's a question of clarification in the chat that I wanted to ask. This term refusers versus the term refusenik or refusnikim, how are like why do you use which term? What do they mean? How do you, yeah, just some.
I don't think it's like super like meaningful, especially in English. We sort of use the terms that we have in English. What I think, what specifically with the refuseniks, there have been a few like big refusal letters, like one in 2008, I think, in 2014, and in 2018, which I was a part of. So we had these like bigger letters with like a lot of signatories. And I think one of the letters was like specifically called the refuseniks letter, but it is all part of the same movement.
And also going back to the response from refusers, refusenikim, whatever, when October 7th happened, October 2023, what was it? What was the experience, your experience personally with the shift in the violence to this extreme total destruction of Gaza and how that was talked about in the refuser community in general, and also like your personal experience with understanding that moment as a former refuser.
Yeah, so following my refusal, I became like very invested with anti-occupation activism. And I became mainly active in Jerusalem, which is where I'm from. I was like born here, raised here, and a lot of what I'm engaged in is like the struggles against home expulsions in East Jerusalem, doing a lot of work in Sheikh Jarrah. And I've been a part of this for years, and also doing a lot of protective presence in the West Bank. And actually on October 7th, I was in the West Bank. I was in Twani, which is a village in Musafirata, which was really a surreal experience. It was a very, very difficult day. And so for us, for like the activist groups who have been in these spaces for so long, acting in solidarity with Palestinians, it was like, for us, it was really clear what is about to happen. And we started demonstrating against it on like October 15th. And we were met with like extreme police brutality. It was crazy. Like our first demonstration was like, I think less than a week after October 7th. Really, it was crazy. And of course, it didn't get any media coverage or any attention at all. And that was sort of one of the incentives for me to start the social media page that I'm managing now. And I manage a page called Voices Against War. And it's like across Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and where I post like the actions we do, the demonstrations we do, and sort of trying to amplify and show the voices that are here, who are resisting the genocide, who are resisting the occupation. And like sometimes we do get a lot of attention over on social media, but the silencing we experience is really extreme. And like following the return of the assault on Gaza and like the end of the ceasefire deal, we again had like very big demonstration that was like super like violently oppressed. Like policemen just like punched people in the face. It was like a few people had to be evacuated to the hospital. It was really difficult. But we are, still demonstrating and still acting, and specifically for refusers. So I think for the public refusers, it took a long time to speak out again, but also not that long. If any of you heard of Tal Mitnick, he was like the first person who publicly refused after October 7th. And he was sentenced for a longer time than me in prison. And what we see is like the sentences for these type of conscientious objector really extended. Itamar Greenberg, who was just recently released, spent almost 200 days in military prison. But they also, they express such an important voice, so people are still doing it. And specifically with the reserve soldiers, we see like a whole new thing. These reserve refusers are people who never aligned themselves before with this type of activism and are like very new to it. And so we have these like very seasoned anti-occupation activists trying to sort of give space and support and incubate this new group of reserve soldiers who have never engaged with this type of activism.
Thank you. And we have a great question from Connie in the chat. How I want to do this is after I ask Connie's question, if people want to either come off mute or if there are multiple people at a time, put the word stack in the chat, and then we'll go in the order that people put stack, or you could ask your question in the chat. So first Connie's question, and then everyone else is open. Connie's wondering how you were treated in military prison.
okay for me, I guess. And I was 18 or 19, and it was like very, I think I was very prepared for it because I was so supported by the refuser movement. Like having these networks such as Musavot, such as Refuser Solidarity Network, it really affects how you feel, because you have, even though your family doesn't necessarily support you or your friends, you know, you lose contact with them, you have this like new community of people, and these community is still my closest friends. And people come and they demonstrate outside the prison, and they send you letters, and all this support really meant a lot for me. And in the prison itself, it's, you know, not like there are, like, most of the prisoners are just these like 18-year-old girls who, most of them sort of deserted from the military because of financial reasons, or just like general mistrust of the system, mainly because of, you know, like social economic reasons. There is like an overrepresentation of the Ethiopic community in military prisons, which is a community that is like brutally treated by the Israeli police and has many reasons to mistrust the system. And so it was like, I think, an opportunity to have a lot of conversations that I never had before about, you know, what is the occupation and what is it being left wing, and like, why do I refuse? And I think being left wing is so demonized in Israeli media that like people would be like, you're not extreme, which is like, okay, I think I'm the most extreme you'll ever meet, but okay. So it was very interesting. And it was, you know, a prison. Yeah, I was locked in a cell for most of the day. We had like drills, and we had to clean a lot. I worked for a long time in the like kitchens. So I had, you know, usually you get 10 minutes a day of phone time. So I got a little bit more because I worked in the kitchen. Very much what you'd imagine a prison would be like. One interesting detail is that the uniforms being worn by the prisoners are hand-me-downs from the US military. So if you...
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Lori and Paul, you have a question next?
Yeah, Atalya, I have two questions. One is, what were your parents' response to you refusing? And the second one is, we live in Cleveland, Ohio, and we meet with a group called Cleveland Peace Action Middle East Committee. We used to meet with JVP as well, and some others. We don't go to their meetings, but we still go to events that they hold. The Cleveland Peace Action group was wanting to have a speaker about people who refuse, you know, to serve in the military in Israel. So I was just wondering how to contact you, if that's, you know, if they would want to do like a Zoom meeting. I think what they're hoping to do is to get people who aren't necessarily already pro-Palestinian invited, but it would probably be via Zoom. And I was my husband brought it up to do it, but we're going to be away all of April, so I couldn't even look into doing anything to organize that until, I mean, we're going to be gone in April until at least May and maybe even June. So those were two questions, your parents, and then if there's a way to contact you. I did see in the chat the Voices Against War on Instagram. I copied that website, and I'm on Instagram, but I don't know, do I have to request to follow?
So let's try and do like the logistics
Yeah.
as much as possible outside of the space, but yeah, I'll pass those two questions to Atalya.
speaking.
Yeah, so I can, I guess, share an email address with you later on,
Okay.
which you can use to contact us. And regarding my family, it was really difficult for my parents. They really wanted me to enlist, and it was, I think, really scary for them to have me sort of step out of the consensus. Israelis are a very militarized society. There is this idea that in order to be a part of this society, you have to be a soldier, or you have to have like passed through the military. And if you haven't, then you just don't have space here. And so it was very difficult for them and very scary. But once I refused, they sort of had to take a different role. And they were my only connection to the outside world. They were the people I called. They were the only people who were allowed to visit me. And so they supported me through that. And they had to sort of, explain to other people, why am I in prison? And that really affected their way of thinking about it. And made them, and I think also once it happened, it was also less scary because it happened, and it made them more like open to understanding these ideas, and now they're like very supportive. And following October 7th, it was, it became very difficult again. It's really hard for them to sort of accept what Israel is, and to reject Zionism. I think it's something that they can't sort of emotionally process, especially because my sister lived and just returned to living very close to the Gaza Strip, and she lives in one of the kibbutzim around the Gaza Strip, and she has 3 small children, and on October 7th they had to escape, and it made my father very militant, and it became more difficult to talk about these things.
Judith is next.
Hi there. I'm Judith. Yeah, thank you very much for speaking to us. I've had a lot of concerns, and it sounds like it's probably similar in Israel to the storyline that being against the occupation, being against the genocide in Gaza makes you anti-Semitic. And it sounds like in this country, JVP has been very active in the, call for a ceasefire and all of this. And yet, especially on campuses, young people are being arrested and disappeared almost for having expressed concern about the genocide. And well, first question, do you see it as a genocide? What's going on? And then secondly, well, and then trying to think about how to really try to force the press to recognize that anti-Semitism and being against this war are not the same thing, and being against the Israeli government's policies. And then the final thing, I'm 72 years old. I've lived a good long life, and I'm healthy. I sometimes think about, as an older person, how I can take more risks on behalf of, trying to be active against these kind of injustices. And I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that, but anyway, so that's, and thanks so much for sharing your story. That's really encouraging and helpful.
Thank you. So I do see what is happening in Gaza as a genocide, and generally, I'm like very engaged with like talking about the story of this land in connection to the Nakba. And I think sort of acknowledging the Nakba and also the Palestinian right of return really sort of forces me to view the reality here as a reality of ethnic cleansing that isn't new, and that isn't like a story of the past few years. It's like the constant story of what is happening here is ethnic cleansing. It used to be slower, but it became more just like more extreme. And I think with rejecting that, like with this mindset also comes rejecting Zionism. And I think for people living here, it's really hard to understand, like, how can you reject Zionism, but not sort of think that Israeli lives should be put in danger. And I think like the idea of sort of trying to see Jewish life as something that is not constrained by the state of Israel is very valuable and important to that. And that is one of the reasons that I feel that the connection with like the international Jewish community is really important. Because you could be a Jewish person living anywhere in the world and have safe and flourishing life, and you don't have to be a Zionist for that. And living here under, like, I would want to see like a one-state solution. I think does not put Jewish life in danger. And like Israeli has not brought safety for Jewish people in any sort of way. So
I think that gets to some of the questions in the chat that I'm going to try and combine, which are, can you clarify where are you now? I believe it's in Jerusalem. So where are you now? What do you like? How do you think about living in Jerusalem if you're, like in doing this work? And there's also a question specifically was mentioned, breaking the silence. I'm going to generalize that a little bit of like what other organizations, in the land known as Israel, like, do you trust, do you work with, do you think are doing like important work alongside you?
So I'll start with the second question. So I am a part of many groups, as a lot of left-wing activists are, at least here. And most of the groups that I am a part of are sort of anarchist groups. And those are groups that don't really see themselves as organizations, and they don't have like the structure, like the clear structure of organizing that is usually for organizations. So I would really recommend looking up Free Jerusalem, which is a group that works in Jerusalem, and Tayush, which is a group that works in the West Bank. And I have some relations with Breaking the Silence. I think they do some really impressive things. But for them, they don't publicly support refusers. So I have some personal relations with activists there, but as organizations, the organization that I work for, which is Refuser Solidarity Network, does not work with Breaking the Silence because they don't publicly support what we do. I also work with the Radical Bloc in Tel Aviv, with activists in Haifa, with Hinenu, with Achvat Ami. And also because I do a lot of social media work, I have a lot of connections through that, sort of collaborating and trying to amplify each other. I do video editing for all sorts of groups. So we try to cooperate a lot. And we also know each other because we're a small minority in a very small country.
Great. And you're physically and
Yeah, I physically am in Jerusalem. Like I said, I grew up here and I spent, I think, all of my life here, maybe like 2 years I wasn't living in Jerusalem. I grew up in an area that is called Musara. It's a neighborhood that is really on the border, and it is both in East Jerusalem and in West Jerusalem. It has like the neighborhood itself has like Palestinian residents and like Jewish Israeli residents. And it's really affected me as a person because I grew up always, you know, living with Palestinian people. And like everything in my life was like very engaged with, you know, Palestinian people, and also seeing what oppression and occupation looks like. Like I remember as a child seeing soldiers stopping people on the street, searching them, seeing the increased presence of soldiers, seeing Damascus Gate turning from a vibrant market into like a military post. So it had a strong effect for me, and I have a very strong connection to this city, and I feel responsibility for the things happening here, such as home demolitions and home expulsions of Palestinians, and like there is a wish, like a declared will by political people, like by right-wing politicians who will say we want to make Jerusalem Jewish. But Jerusalem isn't Jewish. It's like, it is the Palestinian capital.
Are there one or two people who haven't gotten a chance to ask a question yet who'd like to?
I guess I have a question, which I hope is okay to ask. Thank you. I really appreciate what you're doing. And I guess I'm wondering about how you make a living. Like, are you supported? How can we support you? What do you need?
So I work for Fusion Solidarity Network. I work, like I do a lot of activism, but like for like the work I do on social media, like I film video and I edit video and I post it. That's like my like general occupation. And so I get like paid for that. And so like donations for Refuser Solidarity Network are also giving me a living. Yeah, that's what I do. I'm also a student. I'm doing my master's in cultural studies, which is absurd because I'm trying, like, I want to research post-colonialism or colonialism because that's also what I have, what I know, but studying it in Jerusalem is both like really, I think, allows you to learn a lot, but also awful. And I find myself mainly fighting in class with people. So we'll see about that.
Yes, and as Farrell's mentioning in the chat, we thankfully, as JVP Central Ohio, do pay our speakers. So that's also a piece of it, and we'll figure that out on an email afterwards. So I think we have time for one more question from someone else who hasn't spoken yet. If not, I definitely have one. What do you, when you look at the American and American Jewish anti-genocide movements and efforts, what do you wish people maybe understood that's so clear on the ground that maybe is not always translating to our movements here?
I think it's like surprisingly sometimes like difficult for us to cooperate. Like I think those cooperations that we have, like with If Not Now and with JVP, are like super valuable and super important. But we do live in like very different political landscapes. I think for like the politics and even the way that the pro-Palestinian struggle looks like in the US is very different. And I think one of like the questions we sometimes get, which I find very interesting and important to discuss, is the question of like, why are you still here? You know, like you can denounce your citizenship, and you can, like, if you disagree with Israel and you see Israel as a colonial project, why don't you just leave? And I think what is sometimes hard to understand when you're like outside is that because what a lot of what we do is like together with Palestinians, then there isn't this sense of like it will help that we leave. Like it always feels like there are not enough people, and like every day I receive messages of like, there was a settler attack in such and such community. Could somebody spend the night there? And could somebody come to be there? Could somebody come to be like a spectator or like a, I don't know the word, in like a court hearing? What's the word? Like a witness in a court hearing. Like there are so many things that we as Jewish people here can do that Palestinian people can't do. And it's apartheid, and that's what apartheid looks like. We have so many privileges, the way the military treats us, the way the police treat us, the way that the judicial system treats us. But there's a lot of things we can do using these privileges. And it's complicated. I mean, sometimes it feels like, okay, so we helped this community to stay in their land for the past 14 years. Are we just, you know, putting plaster on a wound? Like, just like, you know, supporting this specific community, this specific family. So I don't necessarily know if it's the right thing to do, but the feedback we get from like the Palestinian communities that we work with is that they need us here, and they need more people and more time and more support. And yeah, there are just things you can do here that you can't do in other places. And especially in the beginning, you know, sort of where everything was in chaos, I felt like the things we were able to do were so important. There was so much violence in the beginning, and just like I used to do like 3 days of, or like 4 days of protecting presence every week. And I also now, I mean, there's so much, so many settler attacks, but it's not only that, it's also, you know, like trying to empower reserve soldiers to refuse is like, it isn't like purely anti-Zionist in the way that I think a lot of the people in the international pro-Palestinian movement would think about it. Because like I spent time talking with like these soldiers that aren't really sure if they want to refuse or not. And like I hate them in a way because they were serving in Gaza. But I also think it's like super important that they will refuse now. And that my support for their refusal has like meaning. So it's really complicated.
No, thank you for bringing us into the complexity. We do have 2 more questions in the chat, and then I want to give y'all next steps, but let's take these 2 questions to the third question. Yes, there'll be recording shared. The first question, can you talk about an example perhaps, or have you seen places where you've been able to change people's minds?
I think with these reserve soldiers, it had really, like I felt that I could influence them. And with my family, I've seen a lot. Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know if necessarily changing people's minds is like me. I don't know. It's like it's not what I'm mainly focused in, I guess. So I don't know enough about it. I guess people who are more focused on that will have, like, you know, more experiences regarding that.
And then also, can you speak to believing in a one-state solution, being where being in Jerusalem, and have you seen that in Israeli society as a view?
Yeah, there is a group called Eretz Lekulam. It's in English, it's Land for All. It's a really, like, they have like a very concise vision of a one-state solution, and they're composed of like Israelis, Palestinians. My professor in university is one of the people who started this group. So I think she was influencing and affecting her students, at least, in sort of seeing this view as viable. And for me, it's like, as I said, like, once you acknowledge the Nakba, once you acknowledge that all this land is Palestinian, that like there are no, 67 borders, 48 borders that do not reflect the reality of what Palestine is, and sort of supporting a Palestinian right of return. I think a one-state solution is necessary. I also don't think it's viable to think that all Israelis or like Jewish people living here will live. And yeah, like living in like a mixed city like Jerusalem, like that's what it is. Like they're like my life was never removed from Palestinian people, and it is in many places in Israel, but the way I experience life here, it's not.
Thank you so much, Atalya. I'm dropping in the chat right now this follow-up document. I'm also going to screen share to talk you through it a little bit. I was adding things as you were talking because there was so much good stuff, including, and please correct me if any of these orgs or links are wrong, but including the organizations that Atalya suggested that we look into. Some other opportunities for learning here in Columbus, this Wednesday at 6:30, you'll see a link from Beledna, which is our local Palestinian organization. They're doing a two-part series on settler colonialism starting this Wednesday. We also have our next JVP membership meeting on April 29th at 7 p.m. Does someone else from JVP want to say a word about the speaker and what the topic will be?
I can do that. Don Bryant is a member of Cleveland Peace Action, and he's actually in the West Bank right now, and he'll be returning. He's in Cleveland, Ohio. He's with the Peace Action Cleveland Middle East Committee, and he'll be our speaker. He'll be talking about his stay at the Palestinian Center for Biological Diversity, and he is a great activist for many years in Ohio. So that should be a good opportunity.
Amazing. So definitely join us back for that. And those are some of the learning opportunities. Atalya, do you want to say a word in our action section? Do you want to say a word about this petition that's linked in here? Oh, you're on mute.
Last Wednesday, we launched a petition calling for arms embargo on Israel. The violence we see by the Israeli government is an unprecedented violence that we believe could only be stopped by international intervention, especially by stopping arms shipments into Israel. And you're very welcome to visit the petition and read about it and sign it if you're interested.
Thank you. If you're interested in taking much more involved action and sooner, more involved than signing a petition, there is a bus coming from Columbus to DC for Thursday, Friday, and a major action in DC. The link to the bus sign up is the link in the document. If you're like really feeling mobilized, that would be a great way to take a big action to take that trip. I also heard people saying about campuses, so a self plug. Some of you know I do work with Never Again Action. I dropped our campus non-compliance pledge link in there, which is a great way to think about how to protect students around not complying with the immigration raids that are targeting pro-Palestine protesters. And I also dropped the link to donate to Refuser Solidarity Network to Deborah's question. And then finally, we've got some like JVP chapter pieces where we have an upcoming Liberation Seder. Ian, do you want to say a word about that?
Sure. Yeah, if you're in the Columbus area towards the end of Passover, we'd love to see you there. And the sign up link is there on Shayna's sheet, so you'll be able to RSVP. There's more information on the sign up, and we'll also be putting out a post on Instagram and through our Gmail list early this week. So, yeah, we'd love to see you there and bring a friend.
Amazing. And if you're just not quite sure how you want to plug in, but you want to have a conversation with someone, it'll probably be me or Homa. You can sign up on the member interest form and someone will hopefully give you a call and have a chat about what it looks like to be involved in our chapter. Any other announcements that anyone would like to share or other ways to plug in and take action? I did try and hit a lot of them. So I'm a big believer in doing things before you get off a call. So I want to invite you to spend these last 4 minutes going into the document and doing whichever one of the things speaks to you. And if you want to celebrate what that is in the chat, go for it, because yeah, I was just hearing we know the news is awful. It's awful. I was just listening to a story this morning that that it's the longest in Gaza that no food and medicine, even during this time period since October, hasn't been let in at all to Gaza. So anything when we each do, instead of like falling into despair of just listening to that news item, I think for myself, I ask myself, like, what is the small thing I can do today? So I want to invite you to go into that document and do one of the things, or two of the things, or three of the things. And we'll hang on quietly for a few minutes. And if you need to sign off and celebrate what you did in the chat when you're done. And thank you so much, Atalya.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I'm happy to be here and talk to you.
Thank you so much. Deborah, do you want to speak up to what
Yeah, I have this arms embargo against Israel open, and like I filled it all out, and when I click on add your name, like just nothing happens. So it doesn't feel like it's going through. I don't know if it is. Maybe I just signed it about 12 times. I'm not sure.
Did you use autofill, Deborah?
Yeah, I did. Is that bad?
The country, I think it needs to come from the drop-down list. I had a problem with that as well. So if you
Oh.
click it, and it should say United States of America, not United
I also ran into that when I tried that. Might be
That was it. Thanks, Ian. I'm glad I asked.
We've got petition signing and sharing. We've got Ohio Detroit connections, which is always great in our region. Donations, all sorts of stuff. So it's good stuff. And thank you for sticking with us for the hour. And hopefully we'll see each other again soon. And sorry, the link wasn't working, David. Thank you, Atalya. I really appreciate it. And
Thanks.
do send us the information about send to that email group about sending you